Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's installment of Prophetic News Hour 1. This is Maverine, and today's date is the 25th day of the second month of the biblical year. On the Gregorian calendar, today is May 23rd, 2025. I'm coming to you today after having recorded several reports that I was then led not to release. And those reports were reports focused on the optics and the impact that President Donald Trump's Middle Eastern tour and decisions and alliances and alignments out of that tour would have. But I needed time to stop again and make sure that I am seeing things from a holistic perspective that is not rooted in only in opinion and only in identifying on any spot of the spectrum of ideology, conservative to liberal, etc. And unfortunately, today, what I'd reported or recorded in those reports is proving to be accurate. As the President of the United States was making his Middle Eastern tour and was clearly enjoying the pomp and the circumstance and the ceremony and making decisions to align with Saudi Arabia for defense and research, making decisions to align with Qatar for development and access, making decisions to remove sanctions from Syria, and acknowledging the now leader of Syria who once had a $10 million bounty on his head as a known terrorist. As the president was doing those things, what kept resonating with me as I see 5, 10, 15 steps and years down the road is how that emboldens the very factions and ideologies and individuals and groups who hate America and what America stands for, and who hate Israel and what Israel is created for. To have the United States president patting ones on the back who rightfully should be in prison and deciding that giving more access to companies that have for years infiltrated the United States through their financial investments and through their acquisitions, most under the table and under guise of being American citizens or American residents, legal residents, who want only to be participants in the great American experiment. To have the president do that undermines everything that has been said is a desire to protect first the American people and our boundaries and to stand with the Jewish people. And that emboldening then allows, it feeds the animus, it feeds the pridefulness, it feeds that bullying spirit in those who at once was thinking that there would be quote unquote hell to pay. But now the recognition that as long as you can cut a big business deal and give good optics and lay out the red carpet, maybe, just maybe, rather than having hell to pay for terrorism and hatred, we can actually expand our reach and our access inside your nation and have you give us access to advanced weaponry and defense information and systems That's obvious. That is on the table. Because, truth be told, having come from that industry, many of these nations for decades have infiltrated and had access and had once feeding information back to them. But there was at least the expectation that they needed to do so without being found out. They needed to do so as spies, they needed to do so as infiltrators. But now those things are being opened to these countries, open access to Saudi Arabia and Qatar, to Syria, to UAE. Those things are being openly afforded them. This emboldenment, this increase in the pride of their argument that everyone who does not bow to Allah must die. This increase in that very ideology and what they consider their righteous fight is only strengthened by and advanced by ones who refuse to stand our ground against it. And that starts with the leader of the free world, who's now received the gift, our defense, imagine this, the defense of the United States of America has to receive a gift of an airplane from Qatar. Qatar, who hosted the Hamas terrorists as they celebrated the October 7th, 2023 massacre of infants and babies, women and men, pets. Giving access even the more to Saudi Arabia, whose influence we've already seen on college campuses and in the streets of America as one shout, "Down with America," burning our flag. But they raise the flag of Islam and terrorism. They raise the flag of the made up ideology of Palestine. They raise the flag of terror. We've already seen what their access bears for us. And now we're seeing the more. I call on each one today to consider what happened in Washington, D.C. last night. A young, believing couple. A couple who believes. And they believe even more today than they did yesterday, trust me. Who believes in Yeshua, Jesus, the Messiah, and the wickedness and evil of one who has benefited from America's freedoms and access, benefited from DEI and access to things that many who don't align with DIE ideology or fit in one of their boxes have not had access to. What they and their family are now experiencing. Because that is what the optics of the United States president making deals and becoming best bros with despot governments through affiliations is breeding even the more. It's feeding even the more. And so, what are we to do? Are we again to bury our heads in the sand? Are we to stay on the side of those who hate everything that is Jewish in Israel? Are we to say that this innocent couple was somehow rightfully targeted? Are we to say that this access to our nation now and the deals our president is making won't have dire consequences on each one of us? Only if you're ignorant or completely deceived will you say those things. I'm going to put a link in this message with the story. Again, you'll have to cut and paste so that you're able to access it. But I want you to see what the enemy thinks he has snuffed out, the lives that the enemy thinks he snuffed out, will actually become great, great manifestations of the glory of God and the testimony that there is one God. And Islam will not win. Again, this is not right or left, unless your left is also pro death to America, death to Israel, death to every Jew. If that's your left, I call you completely impotent and cut off in the name that's above every other name. And I make a statement here now that the Most High is raising up a remnant of warriors who will not placate the lie and who will not run from bullies who need their noses bashed in. Because your faith is rooted on things that are sand. Your faith is rooted on things that are wicked. For every freedom loving person, for every person who just recognizes again that each one of us is impacted by the rise of anti Semitism and radical jihad in the United States and around the world. Regardless of your political ideology and your political beliefs, again, unless your political beliefs are anti Semitic, anti Israel, and socialist. For each one of us, we have to see what it is that is clearly being presented to us now, because we are in a battle that is only going to intensify. And we will not be able to hide out in our homes. We will not be able to hide out in fancy vehicles. We will not be able to hide from the battle that is intensifying. So you must decide with whom you'll align. Unfortunately for us right now, and I'm still prayerful, because I believe that even in these alignments, in these new affiliations, these new agreements with despot governments, I'm hopeful and I believe that as we contend for what is true and what is right, every plan of the enemy, every plan of greedy men and women, every plan of those who seek to overcome what is right and true is utterly destroyed, and they are put to shame. I say to you again, for those of you who are hard and fast, don't ever correct or say anything to President Donald Trump. I remind you, especially if you identify as a believer in Yeshua, Jesus, the Messiah, if you identify as a Christian, I remind you what we are taught by the Apostle Paul in 1 Timothy. It's not that we're not ever to correct our leaders and seniors. It's that we are to admonish them and correct them, to plead with them, if you will, as fathers, if they are in the house of God. Otherwise, there is no honor due. Thank you for listening to this. Bear with me as I did not mention the couple's name, because I want this to be about our seeing what the enemy is doing and how our leaders' decisions are now feeding this emboldened attack on American soil, even as ones are just going about their normal days. And I want not in any way to bastardize their beautiful lives, because more than anything, their lives will now be a testimony, will now be a testimony for what will happen for the one who's responsible. I pray his repentance, his true repentance, but if not, in the name of Yeshua, cursed be he and everyone attached and aligned with him. Cursed be their plans to contend against the Most High God. Father, have your way according to their free will. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for pressing through, because I know this is a news channel unlike any other. I don't pretend not to be a follower of Yeshua HaMashiach. I don't believe not to know that the evil is increasing in large part because our sin, our iniquities have reached the full. I don't pretend, as I'm reporting on the news, that these are not natural consequences for our spiritual decisions. And so, as you're listening again, I ask that you consider the facts. Not all facts are truth, and you see how these things are being woven together. And I call on President Donald Trump, I call on the president to do what you said you will do. Why have you not yet rendered the Muslim Brotherhood and CARE as terrorist organizations inside of the United States? Why have you not done what we know needs to be done? I pray God's mercy on you. I pray that you are hearing wise counsel. I genuinely pray that God is directing your heart and will redirect as necessary so that you are not caught in a net. Thank you all for listening. I look forward to sharing the next message. I had intended to go into much greater detail about the purchases and the agreements and the idea of nations wanting to join the Abraham Accords. It's reported that even some Palestinian factions want to join the Abraham Accords. I intended to go into those things, but those things are only manifestations of the things that I shared today. Every nation that does not contend against the wickedness and evil of anti Semitism, Jew hatred, and Christian hatred is a nation who is aligning itself against the Most High God. And there will be consequences for all of us because we all share the same terra, we all share the same earth. So there'll be consequences for all of us. Speak to your leaders. Consider who you're voting for, especially with the upcoming midterm elections. And as you do, know that your decision matters. We'll talk soon, and I pray that many of you will come into a right understanding about what's happening in the natural, and then position yourselves so that you and your families are ones who are covered and ones for whom death truly has no sting. Not that you won't incur death in this earth, our bodies will, but death will have no sting.